up on Global Business, Premier Li Qiang reassures the world of China's commitment to further reforms and opening up at the Boao Forum for Asia. European monetary authorities to discuss the Credit Suisse aftermath and other banking crises in Europe. And we take you to the Autumn-Winter 2023 Shanghai Fashion Week. This year's theme focuses on environmental protection and sustainability. Hello and welcome to Global Business on CGTN. I'm Guanxin in Beijing. And first up in the program, Chinese Premier Li Qiang is calling on governments around the world to work together to energize global growth. Li also called for more cooperation and support for global security initiatives in his address at the opening of the annual conference of the Boao Forum for Asia this morning. And Chen Ziyuan reports.
In his keynote address to the Boao Forum gathering on Thursday, China's new Premier Li Qiang said the world is looking for certainty in growth and wants to proceed on the path of pursuing a better future. He said China does not seek to take over or colonize others to realize its goals.
We
need to implement the GSI, uphold the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security, oppose wanton use of unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction, reject taking sides, block confrontation and new Cold War, and address differences and disputes through peaceful means to jointly uphold world peace and tranquility.
More than 2,000 delegates from over 50 countries and regions have gathered for the forum's annual conference in Hainan province this year. Among them are representatives of governments, business, and entrepreneurs. Premier Li says 60% of the world's population lives in Asia, and the continent accounts for 40% of global economy. He called on political and business leaders to inject new energy into global governance and to work to achieve high-quality development and collaboration through the Belt and Road Initiative.
Working together to build a more vibrant center of growth to bring greater certainty to world economic recovery. Asia, with nearly 60% of the world's population, almost 40% of the global economy, and over 30% of international trade, is an anchor and propeller of global growth and a source of impetus of global economy.
Premier Li says China will continue in its role as a major responsible nation, sharing its wisdom with the world. Officials and experts at the forum say the world has looked to China and Asia to play constructive roles as catalysts for growth. The goal can be met only if the world comes together in pursuing globalization and multilateralism. Chinese officials say they will continue to advance the Global Development Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping and to foster growth in the spirit of solidarity and cooperation. Chen Ziyuan, CGTN, Boao, Hainan Province.
The head of the International Monetary Fund addressed the Boao Forum today. In her address, Kristalina Georgieva said that this year's Boao Forum has lit two beacons of the light for the world to navigate the uncertainties, that is, cooperation and solidarity. IMF expects China and India to account for 50% of the global growth this year. However, there are also obstacles like the high costs of trade fragmentation. Asia, though a source of dynamism, will bear the brunt of it all, she said. We spoke to the IMF chief to understand why China has outperformed the world and why it is important for the global economy. Take a listen.
Fundamentals of the Chinese economy, they're strong. We have a very rapid rebounds from the pandemic since the economy reopened. We have very responsible monetary policy. Inflation in China remains very low. We have calculated that 1% of growth in China generates 0.3% growth for the rest of Asia. And that is translating into more jobs, higher consumer spending, and in that sense aims the world economy to provide better opportunities for everyone.
Zhang Jianchun, vice head of the publicity department of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, made a speech at the Boao Forum for Asia on Thursday. He said that China's digital economy has achieved rapid development due to the thriving copyright industry. Take a listen.
Copyright protection has improved considerably in China and helped create a safe environment for the development of digital economy. Besides, innovations in copyright has provided new impetus for digital economy development. There has also been a steady growth in the number of copyrights that were registered in China last year, with the number exceeding 6.3 million. In 2021, the added value of China's copyright industry was nearly 8.5 trillion yuan, or over $1.2 and accounted for 7.4% of China's gross domestic product that year. China has also been actively expanding its global copyright governance efforts, with an eye on connecting its digital economy to the world.
Green and sustainable development has been one of the major focuses at this year's Boao Forum. Climate change and solutions to achieve the carbon neutrality target were discussed at the Sideline Forum on Wednesday. Participants pointed out that excessive carbon emissions have caused serious climate change and natural disasters worldwide. However, traditional industries still account for a high proportion of global carbon emissions. To achieve sustainable development, experts say an industrial restructuring led by low carbon, digital intelligence, and integration will be a joint right path.
Low carbon, digital intelligence, and integration will lead our energy sector reform and trigger profound changes in our power system. New energy emerges from here. Sustainable infrastructure built on the basis of the above has brought about industrial revolution and created new industries.
The global warming is increasing at unprecedented speed. On the second side, we see that consumption pattern is also doubling and tripling. So there is a need to make investment in all these sectors which are heavy on carbon emissions so that we can have a safer world.
And now for more discussions on what European countries are expecting from the Boao Forum for Asia meeting in China's green transition, let's cross over to Alex Gadia in Brussels. Hi there, Alex. What reaction had there been in Europe to the Boao Forum for Asia?
Well, the main reaction we've seen was from Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, who was in attendance, so one of those major European countries attending the forum, speaking and encouraging China or Asia more generally to open up to Western companies. That's something that we've heard from European businesses here in Brussels and elsewhere for a few months now. Certainly since the reopening of China, there is a real appetite from Western companies to be able to come in and invest and create jobs and boost the economy where possible. And that was a message at the forum from Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister. So that was the major event, the major speaker, at least from Europe. Other than that, a slightly more muted reaction. The forum will have had limited cut through with some of the leaders, but the issues discussed are very, very important indeed, particularly that focus on climate change, that focus on the energy transition. Those are topics that European leaders are certainly interested in and are certainly interested in working with Asian partners on those particular issues, including with Chinese partners as well. So that's one of the main focuses. We'll have seen Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, there in attendance, also saying that nobody wants to see trade fragmentation, nobody wants to see war, and encouraging both the European Union and Spain and the European partners to find better ways to work with their Asian partners where possible.
And Alex, with the green transition as center pillar of discussions at the Boao Forum, how integral will the transition be for Europe?
Well, it's a very, very, very big deal for the European Union, for Europe, for European leaders across the continent. They are very eager to accelerate that green energy transition really as quickly as possible. That comes, of course, from a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Europe, what Europe perceives as an over-dependence on Russian fossil fuels, which has made prices go up in the last few months. Now, those gas prices, for example, have come back down, so the energy crisis in many ways in the short term is no longer a problem, but that long-term structure, that green energy transition has really been brought up the priority list by those leaders who very clearly say, look, we need to be able to rely on our own renewable energy, on our own renewable energy technology, and so there'll be a big push to work with partners internationally like those at the forum to boost that particular industry and accelerate that green transition.
Well, thank you very much for all that information. That was Alex Kalia live for us from Brussels. And now with the global energy supply shortages becoming more acute, countries are accelerating the development of renewable energy. A CGTN reporter talks with the CEO of China's photovoltaic giant on the significance of global cooperation in securing renewable energy supplies.
Green hydrogen is one of the new bets to help tackle climate change. That's a view shared by many delegates at this year's conference of the Boao Forum for Asia. Produced using electricity from renewable sources, so-called green hydrogen burns hot and clean and is essentially emissions-free. China regards production of the gas as a strategic frontier technology. More than a third of state-owned enterprises are gearing up to exploit China's hydrogen-powered development, and more than 20 provinces have announced plans for investment in green hydrogen projects. Among them is Trina Solar, China's solar manufacturing giant with a market value of over $20 billion. CEO Gao Qifan says he's confident his company can have a role in developing China's clean hydrogen industry.
As a photovoltaic company, we have also established our green hydrogen company. Through innovative technology, we use solar power to generate hydrogen at a low cost, which could then be stored not only for energy use, but also for chemical and industrial use.
Mr. Gao says he's optimistic about the prospect of a clean hydrogen industry in China.
China is now leading the race in new energy development when it comes to technological innovation and market scale. Clean hydrogen as a significant component of the new energy system will certainly witness rapid development.
Mr. Gao has identified high costs as one of the challenges facing developing countries in establishing a green hydrogen market. He says without countries cooperating, the goal of reaching carbon neutrality cannot be achieved. And that's a point echoed by many Boao Forum delegates.
But again, I make the point that we can't do that individually. It's a global collaboration because it's globally important to all of us.
Despite the challenges ahead, delegates acknowledge that green energy is the future. They agreed that efforts should be made to help all developing countries enter the new era, which is a direction that every entrepreneur and society as a whole should strive for. Zheng Chunying, CGTN, Boao in Hainan Province.
Now moving on to some other business headlines from across China. China's SOEs administered by the central government made investments to the tune of 350 billion yuan or $51 billion, borrowing property investments during the first 2 months of this year, up 5.6% on a yearly basis. And China's state-owned enterprises saw total revenue rise by 5% on a yearly basis during the first 2 months of the year to over 12 trillion yuan, or around $1.8 trillion. And China's photovoltaic industry continued to be on a strong surge during the first 2 months of the year, with domestic polysilicon and component output rising 60% on a yearly basis. Exports of crystalline silicon cell products rose 160% on a yearly basis during the first 2 months. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology launched a range of services covering 9 aspects to support the development of small and medium-sized enterprises. The services focus on entrepreneurship, technological innovation, digital transformation, green transformation, etc., to promote high-quality development of SMEs. Our Aaron Liu has the details.
This is the laboratory of Jinji PTM Biolab Company, a biotech company which offers proteomic services and reagents for biomedical studies and helping to develop original drugs. Chen said that his company efforts were focused on creating a trinity of precision medicine.
我们公司平均连续最近过去这3年从
We have always attached great importance to R&D investment. During the past 3 years, our investment in this regard was around 10% of our overall sales, which is relatively high by industry standards. Besides, we have also published our research findings in several prestigious international journals.
Based on innovative research and development of proteomics, a study of the entire set of proteins produced by a cell, the company is an industry leader in proteomic reagents and technical services.
从这些创新的技术和产品
The research findings help our clients in diagnosis and treatment, while new drug development plays a catalytic role and fosters a deeper understanding of information development. All of these improve the accuracy and shortens time cycle for new drug development. During the next 3 to 5 years, we plan to build more platforms and expand our presence in overseas markets.
Like Jingjie, there are several such MSMEs in Zhejiang province, which are scaling up their R&D capabilities. Official data shows that the Chinese province is home to over 3.25 million MSMEs. In other words, for every 22 residents in Zhejiang, there is an MSME creating jobs and contributing to economic growth. To promote the development and expansion of MSMEs across China, the government has released a guideline that stresses on cultivation and harnessing of new talent, increasing direct financing and strengthening the application and protection of intellectual property rights for such organizations.
政府侧它大力的在支持。
Government policies are crucial for the growth of MSMEs. It enables us to develop new technologies and products to meet the needs of customers and also expand in the overseas markets. The combined efforts will provide strong impetus for our further development.
Aaron Liu, CGTN.
And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on Global Business. U.S. regulators spent the second day in Congress on Wednesday defending their oversight of the 3 banks that collapsed within days of each other. U.S. banking system is under scrutiny.
In 2023, the Boao Forum for Asia returns with full vigor.
As we move out of the shadow of the pandemic, how do we forge solidarity?
How do we build on RCEP and strengthen coordination in Asia and for Asia?
Where do we find new growth points as the world eyes economic recovery? How do we contribute to a community of a shared future and navigate through the uncertainties?
Join us in our special coverage of the Boao Forum for Asia Annual Conference 2023 as we strive to answer these questions and more, only on CGTN.
Moving on to Europe, where the Credit Suisse banking crisis has triggered some after effects in the bloc. For more on this, let's cross to Julia Lyubova in Geneva. Hi there, Julia. Tell us what's the latest with the Credit Suisse bank takeover. Is the banking crisis easing to some extent?
Well, it's been almost 2 weeks now since the merger between Credit Suisse and UBS has been announced. And in that time, many private customers as well as investors have been seeking clarity as into what's happening with this merger. And so Credit Suisse has been trying to calm the nerves of its private customers by sending out correspondence to say that the merger is expected to be completed by the end of 2023. And in the meantime, everything as far as accounts and banking services stays the same. And well, meanwhile, Swiss authorities, they have revealed the interest rates that Credit Suisse and UBS will have to pay for the 250 billion Swiss francs lifeline that it was given. So Credit Suisse will pay a rate of 1.5% as well as 0.5% for access to the emergency liquidity. And Credit Suisse announced earlier in March that it would need access, it would need to borrow up to 50 billion Swiss francs from this fund, and it was also given access to an additional 200 billion Swiss francs of liquidity assistance. And as for the UBS, on Wednesday, shares in UBS rose after it announced that its former CEO, Sergio Ermotti, would return to lead this controversial takeover of Credit Suisse. And of course, this takeover will be discussed at the next meeting of board of the European Central Bank, especially the impact on European stocks. It's been reported on Thursday that European regulators have distanced themselves from Switzerland's decision to wipe out $17 billion of Credit Suisse's bonds. So the situation, of course, is ongoing, and it's being closely monitored by the European Central Bank.
Well, thank you for the update. That was Julia Lubova live for us from Geneva. And U.S. regulators spent a second day in Congress this Wednesday defending their oversight of 3 banks that collapsed within days of each other after the Senate demanded answers about management and regulatory shortcomings. The House peppered officials with questions about what went wrong. Owen Fairclough has the latest.
Lawmakers in the U.S. House of Representatives taking their turn to quiz bank regulators over the collapse of Silvergate, Silicon Valley and Signature Banks within just a few days earlier this month. Having faced senators on Tuesday, the Federal Reserve, Treasury and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation were all under pressure to explain the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, the biggest of the 3.
The Federal Reserve is responsible for supervising this institution.
Did the Federal Reserve fail on that?
I think that anytime you have a bank failure like this, bank management clearly failed, supervisors failed, and our regulatory system failed.
But what about lawmakers themselves? Democrats and Republicans both voted in 2018 to ease regulations governing insured deposits that allowed SVB and Signature in particular to expand by taking huge deposits they lost with bad investments. When panicked customers began pulling their deposits with a huge percentage of them uninsured, these banks couldn't cover the shortfall and went bust. Even so, Republicans think the FDIC should carry the can for quickly backstopping customer deposits to stop a global financial contagion instead of considering mergers for these failed banks.
Now we need insight into the decisions and decision-making process of financial regulators related to the second and third largest U.S. bank failures.
The FDIC is due to complete a review of its role and deposit insurance levels by May the 1st. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Moving on to some other business headlines that we're tracking at this hour. German consumer prices, harmonized to compare with other European Union countries, rose 7.8% in March and by 1.1% on a monthly basis. U.S. GDP increased at an annualized rate of 2.6% in the first quarter of last year, which is mainly reflected in increases in inventory investment and consumer spending. And in Asia, Vietnam reported a GDP growth of over 3%, down from almost 6% in the previous quarter. The country's central bank said it will continue fresh rounds of interest rate cuts as the economy slows. The Autumn-Winter 2023 Shanghai Fashion Week started last week, and this year's theme focuses on environmental protection and sustainability. Our reporter Zhang Shixuan spoke to some fashion brands and material makers who are going green this year.
The annual fashion carnival is never short of chic clothing with dazzling colors. But at this specific booth, all the designs were made from bio-based materials. They say it cuts carbon emissions by 50%, and petrochemical use by 37% compared to nylon. Though the green material was first developed some 2 decades ago, the appetite from the brands and designers is fresh.
10 years ago, when I was promoting our bio-based material to brands, many were hesitating and would rather consider from the price perspectives. But now, with China's goal of reaching carbon emissions peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, many companies have set up their own plans for carbon reductions, so they are more willing to pay more for an environmental-friendly material.
The green material has already captured the attention of fabric producers like Haoli Shi, which is showcasing its latest products using this material at this year's Fashion Week.
In 2019, we started contact with Sirona. At that time, we had a cooperation project with a top Chinese down jacket brand for special fabric development. And that fabric became the brand's top-selling one for that season. So far, it has been included in the brand's designs for 5 seasons, remaining as top-receiving every year.
It's estimated that the production of every 1 ton of textiles generates on average 23 kilograms of greenhouse gases. That means the fashion industry is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions. So its green transformation is in urgent demand. And here at the ongoing Shanghai Fashion Week, you can tell that it's something been coming for a long time. And the increasing public awareness of the issue is now creating market potential for those who can offer solutions.
The demand for these green fabrics will witness the first blowout growth in 2 or 3 years. Previously, I just promoted the new materials to traditional Chinese brands that open chain stores in shopping malls. But now, I've found that the young individual designers are quicker and more open to the green concept. In just a single morning, I've spoken to 10 or 20 people who want to do business with us.
The rising market awareness has already helped turn green textile products into a business. It's not just about creating new materials with a lower carbon footprint, but also about recycling. Reusing waste fabric and old clothes, redesigning them into new materials and even new clothes is the specialty of Reclothing Bank. Just last year, it opened its first offline store in Shanghai's downtown Hongkou district.
I didn't do any promotion when the flagship store was opened, but the result really surprised me. We have had clients aged between 14 and 74. Our products range from coffee sacks and bags made from renewable leather that priced between 200 and 300 yuan to high-end handmade yak wool products that go for more than 10,000 yuan.
The green transformation of the industry is so urgent that the opening forum of this year's Shanghai Fashion Week was specifically about sustainable development. Zhang was among the guests invited to voice her ideas. She points out that the market is huge. China generates 26 million tons of waste clothing every year, so there is still space for further innovation. Reclothing Bank has also established a lab and started working with manufacturers to take advantage of developments in tech, which could allow them to recycle even more. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And that would do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. The Hub with Wang Guan is coming up next. Stay tuned.